Welcome to the 2014 Saline Mayoral debate. My name is Austin Smith. I am the editor of the Saline Reporter, Washington On Now publication. We have two candidates who will be appearing on the November 4th general election ballot for mayor, and they're both with us tonight. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming. On your, what would be your right, we have Mayor Brian Marl, and then seated on his right is Councilman Lee Bourgoin, the challenger. This will be a traditional response rebuttal format. We will begin with 2-minute opening statements from each candidate, and then they will also be allowed closing remarks limited to 1 minute. I will ask a series of 6 questions as moderator, and then we will move on to the audience submitted questions. The audience submitted questions will follow the same response format as the moderator questions. If you, I believe I've already announced this a few times, if you would like to submit a question to be asked later on in the forum, the comment cards are over there and we have plenty of pins. Write down your question on the comment card and bring it up to us, and you can just set it right here on the table. Can everybody hear me okay? We had such problems with audio at the candidate forums. Now to the candidates. Format will go as follows. Initial responses will be limited to 2 minutes, 30 seconds. This is the first response to questions, either from moderator or audience submitted. Rebuttals will be limited to 90 seconds. And let me make clear that a rebuttal doesn't mean you have to specifically counter a point that was made by the initial respondent. You can use that time to also just explain your answer. There will be an optional 60-second response to the rebuttal. Time will be kept by me, and it will be enforced using these color cards. Yellow card is 15 seconds. Please try to wrap it up. Red card means 0 seconds. Please stop. Okay. Any questions about the time format? Any questions at all? No. Great. Just a few minutes ago, we had a couple coin flips to determine who will be acting first to opening, closing, and to initial responses. But before we begin with the opening statements, I want to go ahead and thank Jacob from SETN. He is here tonight to provide video, and it will be broadcast later on SETN channel 18, correct? Okay. And I want to thank Amy, my staff reporter. She is here. Sorry. She is here. She will be running the live blog that is currently up on our site right now, so people at home can interact, comment, and so we have that available. Okay. The coin flip for the opening statement went to Brian, so that means Brian will close second, and then Lee he won the coin flip for initial response. So with that, Brian, take it away.
Well, firstly, let me thank you, Austin, and your colleagues at the Reporter for your work organizing this forum. I also want to thank all of you in the audience who took the time to be with us this evening, and I appreciate those of you who will be watching this or reading about this forum in the coming weeks. Thank you, too, to Councilmember Bourgoin for joining me this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian Marl, and I've had the honor and the privilege of serving as your mayor these past few years. Saline is part of who I am, and I have been in this community my entire life. My family goes back 5 generations. We've not only lived here, but we've worked here, created jobs here, started businesses here, and we find ways to give back and to serve our community. I'm proud of my track record of serving this community, and I'm running for re-election because I love Saline, and I'm committed to its future. I'm the candidate in this race with a clear and consistent vision of prioritizing the issues that Saline residents care the most about. Now, regardless of his feelings towards me personally, I respect my opponent as an individual. He's obviously an intelligent person and a good family man, and I'm sure a good husband and father. But this race is about our future and about electing someone who can lead. Some people talk about bringing people together and leading. Others do it. I'm proud to be the one that does it. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I look forward to having a robust discussion about the issues that will impact our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. Lee, 2 minutes.
For my opening remarks.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm running because the young new mayor is missing the professional training and experience to do the harder parts of the job, like lowering the taxes back down. Testifying to my abilities, professionally trained former city manager Larry Stover recently stated, "I think you are the most loyal person to the city of Saline that I know of. You deserve to be mayor, and the residents deserve you to be mayor." Over the years, former city council member Jim Peters has told me, "Thanks for sticking up for the Celtic Festival." 9 years ago in Saline, as the lead person in economic development, we attracted more industries to the city than ever before. This was recognized by the Business Review in their opinion piece called "Saline Gets It Right for Business," and the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce honored me for positive economic growth. 19 years ago, when we improved budgets and created downtown parking to attract businesses like Maxicadian Seafood, Mayor Pat Little spoke of me in his State of the City address. He said not only solid administrative skills and experience, but also a strong dose of common sense and fairness. My vision is to improve services in Saline and to help the schools at the same time and to bring taxes back down. And that's what I will do as mayor.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you both. We'll move on to the first question. And this goes to Lee. Sorry, gotta move the mic closer. If elected, would you support higher taxes, lower taxes, or maintaining the status quo, and why? Remember, your response time is 2 minutes 30.
My red line is that we will not cut back government services. We will continue to improve services, help the schools, and lower taxes. Plant Moran auditors for the second year in a row showed the opposite of Mr. Marl's presentations in selling a tax hike that about doubled the taxes of a dozen years prior, supposedly so we don't put the city at the mercy of insolvency. The true actual excess surplus funds are at 25% as of June 30th, 2014, and they're trending further up. This is far above the 20% maximum and above the 15% target. We just got our historical best ever AA bond rating. For 2013, we improved to a very green 1 from the 2000 green level 2 on the Minitrix fiscal indicator scale at the shown on the SEMCOG website. SEMCOG is the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. It rates communities on their financial strength. We have been strong. We are strong. There was no need for a tax increase. Instead of Mr. Marl's option of an urban transit tax, I believe we should extend the 3-year contract with People's Express. They have a grant that allows them a second bus, and we don't need the extra taxes. On taxes for street work, I am against the option of increasing the tax cap in the city charter for roads. We can schedule projects to use the new county road tax, plus many other resources. We will work smarter, and we will lower taxes in 27 ways. I have a list of 27 ways to lower taxes. These include housing development, worth perhaps $800 per household. This includes covering all building inspection costs, worth about $600 per household. 300, I'm sorry, 300 per household. This includes getting many more grants again.
Sorry, time's up. Response, Brian, 90 second, or I'm sorry.
Well, let me first say that
Nice.
listening to Mr. Bourgoin's comments made me think of President Reagan's line, there you go again. Let me clear up a little bit of confusion here. Never, not once, did I ever advocate or suggest that we have a tax for urban transit. And secondly, my opponent has gone around town suggesting that the Plant Moran audit showed that our budget and millage rate that the council put into effect in 2013 was uncalled for, inappropriate, and unwarranted. I just want to be clear. Anybody in this room tonight, anyone who will be reading or watching this forum is welcome to call our consultants at Plant Moran Cressa. They're welcome to talk to any member of council. They're welcome to talk to any member of our current finance team. The audit never said that. To your question, Austin, I think I want to answer it in two parts. The first of which is, in the finite period of time, I think it's appropriate to maintain the millage rate we have. However, we see new signs of life. New businesses coming to the area, increasing demand for home construction. I certainly wouldn't say the local economy is robust yet, but we're moving in the right direction. So as the economy continues to grow and develop and as property values increase, I think it would be responsible to reduce the city's millage rate. I should clarify, however, that I don't think it should be reduced substantially, which could compromise core services that people rely on. But I do see some room for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee, response?
Well, I do have a chart from Plant Moran that has arrows on it. In the first year, where our target was 15% excess cash balance, we were at 16% and moved to 20% to our maximum without, before the tax increase. And with the tax increase, we've moved to 25% and we're shooting towards 30%. And this is from Plant Moran auditors. So what he's saying is just not so. SEMCOG also showed in 2013, and I put a little arrow on it, the increase in taxable value shooting right up from 2012 for all communities, and we do better than most communities. So what he's saying just isn't true.
Thank you. Question 2. How should this, this goes to Brian.
Yep.
How should the city move forward on funding pension costs for retired and current employees?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Austin. Let me preface by saying, in hindsight, and of course hindsight is always 20/20, the city should have transitioned from a defined benefit system to a defined contribution system much earlier than it did. And although it was a tough decision, I'm proud of the fact that I advocated that employees who receive a guaranteed pension contribute a nominal amount annually to that cost, deferring some of the liability. I certainly, as all of my colleagues on City Council do, take the city's pension liability very seriously. As mayor, I spearheaded efforts to adopt a fund balance policy which clearly states that as the fund balance grow, one of our first priorities will be to fund pension liability. And that's why I've worked with my colleagues to empower staff to investigate borrowing, but I'm not beholden to that option. I think that bonding for pension liability or for roads can be an attractive solution, but I also think it's incumbent upon elected leaders to try our best not to expand the debt burden on current taxpayers or future taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee, rebuttal?
Well, actually, I'm the one who's been pushing for bonding for the retirees for well over 2 years. And I do give my opponent credit. I do not dislike him personally, by the way. I think he's a nice enough guy, and I have nothing against him personally. I'm just seeking office in order to do a better job. My red line is that we will not cut back government services. Is this rebuttal?
Correct. 90 seconds.
Well, I basically agree with most of what he says because he's saying what I've been saying for a couple of years.
Okay. Thank you. Response,
I
Brian?
don't have anything to add.
Okay. Question 3. This goes to Lee. Being the largest portion of general fund expenditure, should the city readdress public safety expenses?
Well, let me repeat that my red line is that we will not cut back government services. Jump-starting housing, new housing construction will spread our police costs over more households to achieve lower taxes for everyone. Mr. Marl took the wrong approach in stopping his review of night dispatch based on being told cost savings were no longer needed because enough money had been found. I also did not agree on taking an open meeting topic into closed session. There was a full staff presentation plus an attempt to take an unrecorded consensus vote. That sets up a rubber stamp vote later in open meeting with no discussion. I was opposed to that. To me, the most important criterion in the review of night dispatch was not cutting back on the quality of police services. With no night dispatch in Saline, at times officers may also be away transporting visitors elsewhere, such as Milan. Having no officer in the city while people slept was something I was against. But we do need to seek better quality and more cost-efficient policing. In 2013, I mentioned that police staffing had gone to 1.27 per 1,000 people in Ann Arbor while becoming safer, which compared to ours, 2.95 per 1,000 people. The key is whether residents will be safer, and you do have to look at efficiency.
Brian, rebuttal.
Well, first I want to respond to his comments about a closed meeting that we had. He voted to go into the closed meeting. He never voiced any objection to going into the closed meeting. You participated actively once we went into the closed meeting. So this criticism that he's now articulating came about subsequent to Lee announcing his candidacy for mayor. So I just want to clear up that bit of confusion. To your question, Austin, I think it's absolutely vital that leaders, especially elected leaders, investigate and analyze every service and program to see if there's opportunity for cost savings and improved efficiencies. And as long as I'm a mayor, that will be the approach moving forward, to leave no stone unturned. However, to your specific question, I think that spending on public safety, the spending that we do currently, is appropriate. A core value of mine relating to public safety is that it is always better to spend a little bit too much than to risk spending too little. And I've made my position very clear about staffing levels at the Saline PD. It's in the community's best interest and in our officers' best interest to have a competent dispatcher, supervisor, and 2 officers on every shift. And I think maybe this issue, perhaps more than any of the others, signifies a fundamental difference between my opponent and I. He talked during the 2013-2014 budget about reducing staffing levels at Saline PD by attrition. And in a recent candidate questionnaire, he talked about how the ratio of police officers to citizens is too high. I think that represents a misguided approach and indicates a profound lack of understanding about the importance of public safety.
Thank you, Brian. Response, Lee?
Well, you know, he's making me out as though I'm not interested in public safety. Public safety and our services are something I don't want to diminish. I want to keep up the same safe level that we have now. I am interested in understanding and going through a process with the police department and understanding how our staffing level is different and our costs are different. That's just an efficiency. But my goal is public safety. And with regards to open meeting, I did object during the closed session. I wanted to go back out into open session. Mr. Marl at first said he would, but then came up with a reason not to do it. And at a later meeting, he would not discuss it in open session because he'd gotten all the answers he wanted in closed session, and I refused to participate in voting in closed session. So he says something, but it's not true.
Thank you, Lee. At this point, I want to remind people about the comment cards, so please submit your questions before we move on to the audience portion. You can set them right up here at the table at any time. Okay? Question 4 is everybody's favorite topic, and this goes to, I'm sorry, I lost order.
I think it comes to me if I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken.
think it goes to Brian, yeah. Okay. What is your vision for US 12 Michigan Avenue downtown?
Well, it's a great question, Austin. Let me preface by saying that in my answer, I'm going to refer to the US 12 corridor, and I'm talking about the entire downtown because I think the entire area is impacted by the state highway. My vision for the US 12 corridor consists of the city working closely with community stakeholders, including merchants, the Saline Main Street Organization, and MDOT to work cooperatively and to stay engaged with the reconstruction project that they announced for 2016. I also look forward to soliciting public feedback on this issue. I think that that's absolutely critical, and it's also critical that we get feedback related to the modernization of our streetscape. I think it's also critical that we preserve the historical character of our downtown and develop new strategies and approaches to enhance its economic vitality. There are some immediate things that we can do to our downtown. An example would be to improve Merchants Park, which is the space behind Dan's Downtown Tavern, adjacent to the Saline Downtown Diner. It's in desperate need of repair and enhancement. As many of you know, the city recently hired a consultant to do analysis on US 12 to see what sort of techniques could be employed for traffic calming and improved pedestrian safety. And I think that is an example of my leadership style. It's vital that leaders take the time to evaluate and analyze potential solutions. We can never assume that we have all the answers or that we're an expert on every single issue. Thank you, Austin.
Thank you, Brian. Lee, rebuttal.
Well, my thought is that because there are 25,000 cars on that road, and a road diet is targeted for 10 to 15,000 cars, the west end is growing, so the number of cars will grow between 25 to 30,000. Unless we have bypasses, I would look for a bypass north and south. I'd lower the speed limit. I'd get grants for a 10-foot wide connection from the west end into town to bring customers to town, bring the West End people into town. And I would develop North and South Ann Arbor Street, which is where the real walkable areas are. I would buy a parking lot behind Presbyterian Church right away. I'd buy the back third of the open pit. I would buy more parking off Henry Street, and I would ask for our city to look at the Melbourne, Australia code to see if we can reshape the buildings as they change downtown, so that we can have really walkable and usable congregating areas south of Michigan Avenue and north of Michigan Avenue. If we get a bypass to Milan and up to Ann Arbor, then a road diet would make sense. Right now, it doesn't. Plus, on-street bicycle paths don't make sense, like the guy that was killed on Maple, and mid-block crossings don't seem safe to me, because on Plymouth Road, that young girl killed a student at a mid-block crossing.
Thank you, Lee. Response, Brian?
Well, the only thing I would say is, Lee made the comment earlier about a growing and a fairly robust fund balance. Based on what he just articulated, these new property purchases, we'd have that fund balance be evaporated in the blink of an eye. I guess the only thing that I would add is that our downtown is important. It is in large part what makes us unique and what makes us special, and we do have work to do to improve its economic vitality. But I want to be clear, it's not the only area or geographic region in town that needs improvement and enhancement. I think we need to be cognizant of the businesses in our industrial park and the smaller businesses in some of our shopping centers on both the east and western edge of Saline.
Okay, thank you. Question 5, and this goes to Lee. How should the city move forward with its relationship with the Saline Recreation Center? Do you feel that the funding is sustainable?
On whether the funding is sustainable, the annual audit shows that the city has 1.4179 mils of excess levy capacity. So we could always increase the taxes more. But I want to lower taxes unless the citizens tell me otherwise. On the other hand, Saline Board of Education member Marion Foppel said on March 23, 1988, that in the Saline Reporter, that since the city is less than 1/10 of the 100 square mile school district, it is unfair for the citizens inside the city to carry the tax burdens for services used by the whole area. I think that's still true today, many years later. I intend to resolve the recreation center issue by doing a scientifically valid survey of the Saline silent majority to learn whether our citizens would prefer, number one, privatizing for the most savings. Number two, spreading the costs to all users for a moderate saving, either through a 1917 law or county recreation. Or number three, leave it in the city budget. You have to leave the third one in there. I don't think most Saline residents will take that one. Mr. Marl did not charge his review committee properly last year. Our costs to date have been $11 million for capital plant and about $3 million for operations. This is about $4,000 per taxpayer. Much more for the facilities than for the operations. Dropping membership fees for those outside the city did not address the overall issue. We have to come at this head on and figure it out, and I would.
Thank you, Lee. Brian, rebuttal.
Well, let me tell you what we've done. City government, and I'll give you some context. City government has had to financially support the rec center for more than 20 years. It's an issue that I have taken seriously and one that we acted upon in the first few months of my term as mayor. At my urging, council convened a task force including council members, staff, and for the first time, and this is what I'm really proud of, people who were not part of city government. The task force's mission could not have been clearer, which was to improve the vitality of the rec center. The recommendations were unanimously approved by council and took effect on January 1 of this year. The changes have made it easier and more attractive for individuals to become members of the rec center, and we were already seeing positive signs as a result of these changes. This is an issue that obviously we will continue to follow closely, but I'm excited to see the full impact of these changes on our city.
Thank you, Brian. Lee, response?
Well, the change was, and I voted it for it, because the alternatives we were giving, it's like filling empty airline seats. Airline seats might go for $600, but at the end, you let them go for $100 just to get another $100. So what we were told at city council is we're giving the choice of, do you want to try to get a few more members to try to get a few more dollars? Yes, we do, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is, what do we do with the rec center?
Thank you. Okay, this is actually the final question I have as moderator, and this goes to Brian. How would you characterize your leadership style and explain how your leadership would benefit the city and its residents?
Yeah, thank you, Austin. I think I don't think there's a question that was asked tonight in advance of our forum that highlights the significant differences between myself and my opponent more than this one. I believe that it's critical as a leader to listen, to be inclusive, to be collaborative. If you're going to be an effective leader, you cannot be rigid or inflexible. And in leadership positions, it's important to have a vision and a purpose to your work. I'm proud that during my tenure as mayor, we've tackled some big issues: sustainability of the rec center, modernization of our codes and regulations. We're working to combat the growing trend of substance abuse in our community. And we've also, for the first time in 20 years, begun to take a look at our sidewalks. In leadership, results matter, and I think it's very clear that I'm the candidate in this race who can point to accomplishments that have benefited the Saline community. Thank you, Austin.
Thank you. Lee.
Well, all of those issues that he talked about are staff-driven issues, and I would have done pretty much the same thing. When you have kids dying of drugs in your community and your public safety is interested in doing something, I would have supported that. My weaknesses are that I don't speak very well, I don't come across very well, but my strengths are that I know what I'm doing. I've done the finance and business job at City Hall, and I would do a better job and be able to lower taxes, get good solutions. Of course you include people. I've always worked with teams. I don't think our styles are so different. I just think our knowledge base is different. The ability to get things done is different. I would get a lot more done. I would have accomplished something with the rec center rather than just kick the ball down the road.
Thank you, Lee. Brian, response?
Well, I think our styles are very different. I think this is a fundamental issue. Again, you can talk about being collaborative and you can talk about being inclusive, or you can do it. We have a great team at City Hall, a great group of staff members and a great group on City Council. And, you know, I'm proud to acknowledge that every single one of our colleagues, Lee, has endorsed me. All of the other 5 incumbent members of council have endorsed me. That has never happened in the history of the city of Saline. And I think it's indicative in part of my leadership style, but it's also indicative of what kind of mayor you would be. And I think, quite frankly, with no disrespect, it would be a disaster. We've seen over the past 2 years, you advocate for a whole host of things. You haven't been able to accomplish anything. So again, it gets down to results and accomplishments. There's one candidate in this race that can accomplish something tangible. There's one that can't. It's fundamental.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, last call for audience-submitted questions. I'm going to go ahead and, oh, wonderful. Going once, going twice. Beautiful, thank you, David. Okay. I'm going to start with a Mary question. Mary Hess. Of course, right? Okay, I'm sorry. And this is, and again, we're going to follow the same alternating format, so this is going to go to Lee.
How many seconds?
2 minutes 30.
Okay.
Same time format, too.
Okay.
City Council talks about the need to keep downtown vital, but when people enter both sides of Saline, they see mostly empty shopping centers, and I believe she's referring to the west side of town. Both, okay, yeah, okay, gotcha. That's okay. What is being done to help the end caps of the downtown, essentially?
Well, we don't have a focus on them. I think what we need to do is work for the 98% of our tax base that is not in the commercial strip. The commercial strip, whether commercial buildings fill up or not, is a function of market rental rates. If somebody has a high rental rate, it won't fill up very quickly. It's also a function of the Great Recession from 2008 to now, and we've just been pulling out of the Great Recession for about 3 years now. We're coming up, but that's part of it. So I don't think of government as doing anything other than promoting the city as a whole, developing the sidewalks, developing the public space, working collaboratively with commercial businesses, but we are not in charge of getting businesses into all of these places. Brokers do that, the market does that, the rental rate does that. So.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Brian, rebuttal.
Well, I actually agree with him in part that a number of the vacancies are a result of market factors and the downturn in the economy. He's absolutely correct about that. But I do think there is a role for government to play in assisting business development and investment in our community. And Mary, as you will recall, earlier this evening I mentioned the importance of not just having a singular focus on downtown, but understanding the importance of every geographic region in the community and appreciating and respecting businesses of all shapes and sizes. So I think there are a few things that we can do. One of the things that we started last year, but the work continues, is we developed an economic development task force made up of EDC, TIFA members, made up of staff, Councilmember Gearbaugh, and some of our local business leaders to look at new strategies and approaches to bringing businesses to this community. I also think that the city of Saline deserves a mayor who's going to work aggressively with brokers and other interested parties to meet with potential and budding entrepreneurs and small business people and let them know about all of the great benefits and attributes to locating or expanding your business in the city of Saline. So again, I do think there is a role for government to play in this.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Lee, response.
Well, when I was leading economic development in the city, I did do that. I met with brokers and so forth. But I think our economic development is no longer the commercial strip. Our economic development at Saline, because we built City Hall from 6,000 square feet. We rebuilt it. Guess how many thousand square feet? Not 16, not 26, 35,000 square feet. City Hall was built for 20,000 population. We're 9,000 population. I think our development is going to be general tax-based development. It's going to be those housing developments that keep going on the edge. We are not part of that stream right now because we haven't made ourselves part of it. I would jumpstart economic development. Businesses want more customers. The more population you have, the more people there are to reduce the tax burden.
Thank you, Lee. Response, Brian?
I
I'm sorry.
I don't get a response, yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Moving on to the next audience question, and this one goes to Brian. Education has been raised as an issue in leadership qualities. How will you communicate issues to the general citizens that will be clear and understandable?
Repeat that question one more time.
Sure.
I apologize.
No problem. Education has been raised as an issue in leadership qualities dealing with this election. How will you communicate issues to the general citizenship that will be clear and understandable?
Well, I guess my answer is going to be brief. I think I do a pretty good job of articulating things to the people I represent in clear and coherent ways. But more importantly, the citizens of Saline deserve a mayor and deserve members of council, for that matter, who are going to be accessible and going to be engaged. And so I think people recognize the face and the name in the community. They see me at community events. They see me out and about. And they know that I have a reputation for picking up the phone and returning emails when they reach out to me with a question or concern. And that's the format that I've followed as a council member and during my first term as mayor. And that's something I'll continue if reelected.
Thank you, Brian. Lee?
Well, there are two parts to education. There's our school system, which I want to support, and there's also the education, training, and background that lets you understand things so that you can communicate them to people. During the past 2 years, the presentations have been that we did not have enough money, that we were in dire straits, we had to keep out of insolvency, that type of thing. That was totally false. That wasn't even true. The auditors have shown that that's not true. Everything was going up and better. We did not take advantage of the developers knocking on the door who really, really want to start housing here, and that would expand our community, expand our tax base, and lower taxes. So I think I'm probably not the best communicator, but I'm a good thinker, and I do understand how to collaborate and work with a team. I've done it my entire life. I've been a military officer. I've led people. I've been led by others. I've worked within teams. So I would both help the schools and try to communicate clearly. I would use charts, and I would use true statements. True statements really help.
Thank you, Lee. Brian, response?
Well, he said it himself. He's not that good of a communicator. So I don't exactly know how to respond. Certainly, Mr. Bourgoin has many years of experience, a lot of relevant experience, and that's great. I also have a lot of experience that I put to use on a daily basis serving the citizens of Saline. And experience is wonderful, but if you can't communicate in clear and succinct and honest ways, what good is that experience? And again, I think my track record is pretty clear that I engage and communicate robustly, clearly, openly, and honestly with the people I represent, and that's something I'll continue doing as mayor. Excuse me.
Thank you. Okay, this one goes to Lee. Saline Hospital was valuable to the community. Given Chelsea's success with their hospital, what can be done from the city to restore and expand our hospital?
This is a chart from the analysis that Saline Hospital did when they moved out of the community. What the chart says is that between 2010 and 2030, there will be no population increase in Saline. They used that as the basis for not having enough customers in Saline. This chart came from the presentation that they gave us after they had met with other individuals at City Hall. If our population was growing, St. Joseph Mercy Hospital would consider expanding services. I don't know if they would bring the entire hospital back at this point. It's really hard to bring something back once you've closed down. But the issue has been that we did not engage with the developers who wanted to expand housing. Our facilities are too large for our population. We've spent too much on our facilities and made them too large. We don't have enough population. So the hospital needs customers. They need people to treat. They need more population.
Okay, thank you. Brian, rebuttal?
Well, Mr. Bourgoin is correct in part. The leadership team of St. Joseph Mercy Health System, did show us that report and analysis, and their data seems to reflect that Saline is not going to grow. But in addition to that, one of the things that was articulated to me was the fact that Saline is so closely connected with the greater Ann Arbor area, and that many people from the Saline community utilize healthcare services and products in the greater Ann Arbor area. And it just didn't make economic sense to maintain something, maintain an independent hospital in our community. Now, as many of you know, when St. Joe made that announcement, I voiced some pretty strong opposition, and I was disappointed that they didn't communicate proactively with the community. We've maintained open and honest lines of communication, and I've talked to them about the need to continue to invest and continue to be present in the Saline community. One of the things that we know is that our population is going to continue to age, and I think we're going to blow these statistics and these trends out of the water. I think in the years to come we are going to grow, but it's undeniable that we are going to age, and aging populations require more, better, modern healthcare services and products. So I do think it's vitally important, and it's something we're going to continue to advocate for during my tenure as mayor.
Thank you. Lee, response?
Well, I think the key, I think Brian's right. I don't always disagree with him, and it just appears that way because he has control of the forum, and sometimes I bring things up that are issues. I do think that no population growth was a real sticky point for them. It is true that aging population does demand more services, and I don't think it's true that people prefer to go to Ypsilanti or Ann Arbor. I think if there was something local, people would want to use it because it's handier, it's closer, it's easier to get to if you're having a heart attack or some type of episode. So I think people would use it, but they just don't have enough population base. We need to grow our housing, and I'm going to jumpstart it.
Thank you. Okay, we have a few more here. This one is going to Brian, correct? Yes. Okay. Is it possible, let me take a second look at this. Is it possible to use master planning, zoning, planning commission, etc., to prevent new shopping centers being built as two older shopping centers are standing almost empty?
I apologize, Austin, and I apologize to the person who submitted the question. Can you repeat that? I just don't understand.
No problem. Is it possible to use master planning, zoning, planning commission, etc., to prevent new shopping centers being built as two older shopping centers are standing almost empty? Maybe he's talking more about creating new ordinance or new licensing for businesses, retail coming in, something like that, in order to try to fill out the vacant storefronts that currently exist.
I understand the question.
You do, okay. Brian?
Okay, I get that, I guess to an extent. I suppose that theoretically policies and regulations could be put in place to encourage investment in occupancy in vacant storefronts and shopping centers as opposed to building new ones. I would have to think about that. That's, I'm not the type of person who rejects anything outright, but my first inclination is, I guess, to think about that. I do want to plug for just a moment, though, as it relates to our policies and our ordinances and regulations, that we've started a process earlier this year, it's being chaired by former council member, former Mayor Pat Little, to modernize, streamline, and reduce the regulatory burden that we place on private citizens and businesses. And I'm very proud of the work that group is currently doing. And actually, there's a customer service component to that, for lack of a better way to articulate it. And it is that if businesses, individuals, community groups have suggestions, have concerns, have thoughts of policies, regulations, ordinances that can be improved and tweaked, send them on to the group, contact me. We're happy to take a look at it, because I think making sure our regulatory burden is modern and not as restrictive as some of our neighbors is vitally important.
Okay. Lee?
The answer is absolutely yes. You can use master planning and zoning to decide what your community will be. And you can limit that in the future. There are communities that are 100% residential. That's possible. You can change, or you can plan for, the remainder of your community. You can do that through zoning and planning. The answer is just yes.
Thank you. Okay, last question, and this goes to Lee. What are the three main things that should be done to attract more businesses and residents to Saline?
Lower taxes. Our taxes, that's number one. Our taxes have doubled in the past 11 years, and they've gone up and down over time. In 1984, in the Saline Report, it was reported that Saline had the lowest taxes. I think Don Shelton was mayor at the time. Saline had the lowest taxes of any city or village in Washtenaw County. Over time, communities like Pittsfield that have stayed 5+ or 6+ mills, we've gone from 8+ to over 16+ mills. It is possible for us to get our business done and lower our taxes. Another thing that you could do to increase attractiveness of the community is support public safety, support the schools, because have a supportive environment where people want to come to, both as businesses and households. And in terms of businesses, if we had some type of Ann Arbor connection in our names of our business parks, that would be attractive worldwide, because Ann Arbor is so well known. So if some of our parks had an Ann Arbor name connection in our industrial parks, and also if our industrial parks were no longer just industrial, smokestack industries no longer serve communities. The personal property tax support is going away. So you actually will be served better by first-class buildings like medical buildings and research centers and things like that. So we need to change our thinking and align ourselves with that type of thought. And that will require people thinking together about it. That requires a whole team at City Hall to think about it.
Before we move on, I apologize, Brian. I just realized that I did not give you the optional 60-second for the master planning question.
Fine.
Okay, I apologize for that. Rebuttal to the current question.
Well, let me first respond to this narrative that Mr. Bourgoin has concocted about taxes, and now he's sort of channeling the Tea Party and proclaiming himself to be a tax cutter. Taxes did go up substantially. They went up substantially during his tenure as finance director. And I think it was at his last meeting before he abruptly resigned as finance director, when we were considering our 2012-2013 budget, and we were looking at a pretty sizable deficit. He advocated implementing the fire special assessment, which would cost the average taxpayer substantially more than the solution we put in place last year. But to your question, what are some of the best things that the community, the city, can do to attract investment? Obviously, taxes is a big issue. Also, investing critically in our infrastructure is important. Reducing the regulatory burden on our businesses, both large and small. Facilitating connections between existing businesses and budding entrepreneurs with organizations and individuals and resources that can support them, like MEDC, like Ann Arbor Spark, like SCORE, like the Michigan Small Business Technology Development Center, and also having a coherent and consistent economic development plan, which again is one of the things we're working on since I established an economic development work group comprised of economic development board members, city council staff, and some of our local business leaders.
Okay. Lee, your response?
Well, he's not appropriately presenting my position. I don't expect him to. Economic development in the future for Saline will not be industries. There will be a lot of small businesses, but they'll only be a very small part of our economic development. Our main engine of economic development will be housing growth. Will be our tax base will grow. So this excessive focus on commercial turnover, half of new businesses go broke in the first 5 years. There's turnover, that just happens. Very small startups usually don't become very large or contribute a huge amount to the community. I mean, what will contribute most to this community will be growth of the community itself.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, now we're on to closing statements, and Brian won the coin flip for the introductory remarks, so Lee, you get first on the closing.
Okay. Well, I asked the citizens for their vote to provide better services and lower taxes back down. But I also have an issue that I want to bring up. There's an issue concerning press coverage that affects the democratic freedom of the community. The Saline Post is distorting coverage. As of just prior to this meeting, the Saline Post is not showing my Tuesday morning press release. The Saline Reporter did in the newspaper, even though it took them longer to get it to press. But the Saline Post did show the weekly press releases of Mr. Marl. The Saline Post also distorted other coverage, including the road diet, such as the MDOT data and some political spin on that topic. They lowballed the data. So I think you should consider the source. I think
Thank you. Closing remarks. Brian, 1 minute.
Well, again, I want to thank the organizers of tonight's forum, and I want to thank all of you for attending. Earlier this evening, I talked about the fact that this race is about Saline's future, and I take that very seriously. Members of this community have had ample opportunity to see the performance and the ability of both of us running for mayor. One of us is a leader, one of us is not. I'm proud to be someone who can bring people together and facilitate collaboration to find solutions to our city's challenges. You will always know where I stand, and you'll always know that I will focus on the issues that are most critical to Saline's future, like public safety, economic development, and responsibly managing city finances. I believe that the choice in this election is clear, but the decision is yours. I humbly ask for your confidence and your vote on November 4th. Thank you, and may God bless Saline.
Okay, let's have a hand for the candidates. Good job, guys. Good job, guys. Really appreciate it. So that concludes our forum for tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming out. Do not forget to vote on November 4th. And I know that everybody wants to scoot out of here and get to Art on the Runway. So thank you again, and we'll see you again. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everybody.